Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Kathy and Charles were married. They had been raising 6-year-old Andrew for 8 years and could have been quite a happy family if it weren't for the frequent visits from Mom and her husband, Clara, which is as old as the world. Mother-in-law doesn't like her daughter-in-law. One could put up with it, since it didn't seem to come to open conflicts, and no one has any control over their own feelings. Kathy, too, felt this dislike literally from the first meeting with the then future mother-in-law. So what? Especially since she and Charles had lived apart from his mother from the beginning. At first in a rented apartment, then bought their own. The only pity is that not far from Clara it was Charles who insisted. You can't leave your mother alone without being able to visit her son at any time. Not to say that Kathy's husband was a classic mama's boy, but his mother meant a lot in his life. He listened to her opinion. Kathy was sympathetic and never tried to drive a wedge between Clara and Charles. She never resented her mother-in-law's visits. She did not clash with her and was even sympathetic to the lonely old woman. What did she have left in her life except her son and his family? After all, nothing. Charles's father had died long ago, and her mother-in-law had not been able to establish a new personal life. When her son had married, she had lived with a man. But then that man had disappeared, and there were no new ones. Clara had also retired, although she continued to work, but not as regularly. She had enough time to visit her son. For what else was there to do? Clara herself thought she was the perfect mother-in-law. That is, for any other girl, not for this Soka. That was what she contemptuously called heaven to herself. Is that the kind of wife my Charles should have? What did he find in her? That's the truth. No skin, no face, no intelligence, no imagination. Not even a higher education. A cashier in a store, back in the day, when everything was in short supply, that would have mattered. And now, what is a cashier in a store? It's embarrassing, who's to say? Nothing else. Another girl would have been happy if she'd managed to lure a guy like that. Her mother-in-law would have carried her in her arms, but this one acts like she has to. She doesn't make any sense at all. In short, Clara had no specific complaints about her daughter-in-law. She just wasn't like that, that's all. Even the birth of her grandson hadn't changed her opinion of Kathy. She seemed to be glad too. Andrew even fell in love with him. But he wasn't what she thought he was. I mean, not like that. Claims were still fuzzy. Not our kind. To hear her tell it, she herself led her Charles from the maternity hospital by the hand. And on the way, he was already reading poetry. So, have you got teeth? Clara asked, coming to visit her 3-month-old grandson. No way. It's still early, Kathy wondered. It's not too early. At least you should be able to see it by now. At 3 months old, it's about time. And what is it that you have? It still does not roll over, and roll over, sit down does not try. Strange that all children at this age are already trying. Charles, at any rate, was already grasping his fingers and sitting up like this. This kind of talk went on all the time. The baby did not walk at 10 months. It was weird and atypical at that age. He didn't start talking at a year old. Again, it was weird. And maybe even some kind of abnormality. Nowadays, children all develop so early. You've been to the doctor. What he said. Maybe some special examinations. A young mother. Such talk offended her. But she tried not to pay attention to the quirks of an elderly woman. Although, of course, it was strange to treat her own grandson this way, to consider him almost underdeveloped. Clara told her son that more than once. Not in front of Kathy, of course, in private. Especially when Charles went to his mother's house, without his wife and son, he came often. Mother often needed some kind of male help. He could move furniture, hang curtains, or just sit and talk. What was there to talk about? How about Charles's new life? Extremely unfortunate, and as was sure Clara unhappy. Ah, my son, how I dreamed that you had a good happy life. a good wife, smart children. Andrew is wonderful, of course, but still does not develop as quickly as other children. I think this is just your Kathy's fault. She didn't smoke when she was pregnant. No, Mother, she doesn't smoke at all. And she can't stand the smell of tobacco. She'll tell you. How do you know what she was doing at work? The ones who work at the store, they all smoke and drink in their spare time. Why would your child do that? At 3 years old, he has no interest in books. You already knew all the letters at his age. Remember how we used to read books together? Sit down, sweetheart. At least where you can have a decent meal, if not at your mother's. I can't even imagine what it's feeding you. You live on nothing but sandwiches, don't you? Charles didn't mind his mother much. For one thing, he knew it was useless. He knew her character. And secondly, when his mother was talking about Kathy, it really seemed to him that something was wrong in their lives really, and that she didn't cook like her mother did. And she probably didn't take care of her son very much. He's always at work. He just doesn't have time. Kathy sits at home all day, and the child really can't read yet. Of course, he's small. We have to wait until he grows up. Then we'll see. But now, Charles didn't spend a lot of time with his son, precisely because he's small and can't do anything yet. When she grows up, they'll walk and talk together about everything. Maybe go to a soccer game or something else. What about the baby? While he's still his mother's son. And let Kathy take care of him. Andrew was growing up, developing quite well. Kathy was doing quite well with him. She took him to different sections for additional classes, and she saw that her son was no worse than other children, and many of them were even better in development. All praise him and teachers in kindergarten, and the coach and neighbors. Only his grandmother continues to grumble. In general, she was not interested in her mother-in-law's opinion. She was already used to her remarks and did not pay much attention to them. Only her unwillingness to offend her husband prevented her from responding sharply to Clara. Kathy and Charles had a mutual friend, James. At one time, they had all lived in the neighborhood. James had even courted Kathy in her youth, but she chose Charles. She married him. This was not an obstacle to their friendship. James may have been resentful for a while, but then he calmed down and became a friend, not just of Charles, but of the whole family. His parents stayed to live in their town, and James himself moved to New York, where he was offered a good job. This was how they saw each other. They didn't see each other much except to return phone calls. A couple ring her with him. Apparently, here she is on Charles' mind and switched him for fun. James to the baby. And Charles himself believed it. He's an honest man, not capable of cheating or lying. But what was I looking at? How could I not see what was going on? And worried my brain. Clara began to put 2 and 2 together. I should have known sooner it wasn't that easy. Here all the bells were ringing. She came to visit her friends one day. She saw Andrew playing with a new car. Not a simple one, but a radio-controlled one that costs a lot of money. She was surprised and asked her grandson, "How long ago? Your parents bought you such a beautiful car." And the boy, "Well, of course," the child answered. "Santa Claus brought it to me." Clara then said to her son, "What is it that you spoil your child from the age of 5 so much? Yes, you bought such an expensive car. He doesn't understand anything yet. It will break quickly, and you spent so much money." That's probably it. Of course, why wouldn't you spend your money on luxury? The simple-minded son answered honestly, "No, we didn't buy it. James sent it for Christmas. He didn't come empty-handed now either. He's got some sort of construction kit. Not a small one, but a huge one. The whole box. It must take a grown man a month to work on a toy like that. Tell me, where is it seen that someone else's child gave such gifts? Why on earth would they do that?" And it turns out that his son is just like his portrait. So he tries. He didn't just give it as a present. Andrew himself is playing on the floor crawling. Well, his own son. And he's probably still playing with Kathy. I should have asked what he brought her as a present. I bet he didn't come empty-handed, did he? Oh, poor Charles. Raising someone else's child. He won't have any of his own. A simple soul. How can you not guess I'll have to open my poor son's eyes to his precious wife's shenanigans? And her unscrupulous one. I must say her secret is out. Let her know that not everyone can be cheated like that. The next time her mother-in-law showed up at her son's house when Charles himself was at work and had a serious conversation with Kathy, well, the bride, then you will confess. Or do you think you'll be glad you spent your whole life with your husband so cleverly? You hope that my Charles will feed and raise someone else's child, and my real daddy will come once a year and give him cars. What do you mean, Clara? Kathy was surprised. She wasn't even frightened by those words. She smiled, thinking that her mother-in-law was joking. Though Clara had never been much for jokes. Why are you smiling? You are the man. A man as simple-minded and honest as Charles. You could have fooled me, but you didn't. He's got a mother, and you can't fool a mother. I have to watch and think for two men. And I can see perfectly well what's what. What do you see? I do not understand. The girl asked seriously. You don't, but I do understand. Andrew, he is your and James' son, not Charles. Isn't it? Really, Clara? How can you say that? How can he be a sure son when he was born 2 years after James left? How long does it take him to come? He's coming even now. And not the fact that only twice a year he might visit his though. Clara continued venomously. No, it's unbearable. You say absolutely impossible things. I don't know who comes and visits whom. But Andrew is Charles' son. Well, yes, on paper of course. Charles, that's a clever arrangement you've made. I just admire it. What is it really like? Come on, decide from whom. Is Charles supposed to know everything? From me? Or is she going to confess? Or are you going to lie for the rest of your life? Him and the baby. I have nothing to confess, Kathy exclaimed with indignation. Say what you want. Charles, believe me, it never occurred to him, not to you, that I was cheating on him. And that Andrew is not his son. He loves Andrew. Of course he does, and you'll love the dog. If you live with it for 6 years. I'm not saying anyone doesn't love someone. Charles, the good man, is gullible. But when he finds out what's really going on in his house, I don't think he's going to care about love. You're not going to confess, are you? I'll be sure to talk to Charles today, Kathy exclaimed. I'll tell him what you're trying to accuse me of without any foundation, by the way. Aren't you ashamed of making such a thing up? Oh, you're such a filth, aren't you? Clara answered calmly. You are cheating on your husband. You cheat on him at every step. And I should be ashamed. I've never had such stories. I married honestly and lived honestly with my husband. And there was no doubt in anyone's mind that my child was not another man's child. And no uncle gave my Charles such presents or played with him, because Charles had a real father. And your Andrew is going to grow up like that, not knowing who he is. I don't want to listen to you anymore. Kathy wanted to throw her mother-in-law out of the house, but she did not dare to speak against her so openly. So she left the room herself, slamming the door and tail. Poisonously said her mother-in-law after her. The cat knows whose meat she ate. She knew her deceit had been discovered. Didn't like it. We'll nail your tail, and say we'll nail your tail. She headed for the door, about to leave. But she shouted one last time, sodding in her daughter-in-law's kitchen. It's up to you. Who Charles will open his eyes to your shenanigans. But be warned, and I will not be silent. That's enough. Kathy was well aware of that, and decided to talk to her husband herself, tell him about her mother's hunch, and ask him to stop it all at last. How long would she endure insults from her mother-in-law? In the evening, she had already put her son to bed. She sat down with her husband to talk about it. This afternoon, when you were at work, your mother came by, and you can imagine what she said to me. She thinks that Andrew is not your son, that I gave birth to James. On what basis did she get that idea? Charles wondered. On the grounds that James gives our son gifts that are too expensive. So it is his son. I'm sorry, Charles, but this is too much. I've put up with her saying I can't cook, I don't want to clean, and I'm no good. But this is too much. You should talk to her, explain to her that you can't do that. I hope you don't believe that yourself. Of course I don't. I believe you. It never occurred to me to do anything like that. I'll try to talk to my mother. Don't be offended. Come on, why are you getting offended? She's an old woman, lonely. But she had something to say. What about you? You could have ignored it. I mean, you and me. We're fine, if you ask me. Of course we're fine. Charles, I love you. I can't live without you. But I think she's trying to divorce us. I don't even want to think about that. It's not going to happen. Don't doubt it. Charles promised firmly, determined to really sort things out and have a serious talk with Mom. He could see perfectly well that she disliked Kathy, but he didn't understand the meaning of that dislike. And the fact that his mother thought his wife was cheating on him really seemed excessive already. I'll come by tomorrow after work and talk to her. It shouldn't be like that. What makes her think that? That Andrew, son of James. Make that up. You'd have to try a lot harder than that. Not happy. I think he really went to see his mother the next night too. She was, as always, excitedly rattling about in the kitchen, wishing she could feed her son better than he was being fed in that house. But Charles stopped her. Wait, Mother, I don't have time to wait for your pies. I'll eat at home. I assure you, Kathy is an excellent cook, as good as you are, he said, wishing he hadn't offended his mother. But it's worse, isn't it? Clara said pitifully, looking at her son expectantly as she realized what kind of conversation was in store for them. I didn't come to talk about the billet. Kathy told me that you visited her yesterday and told her about your suspicions about Andrew. You know, she's very offended. I just want to tell you that these fabrications have no basis whatsoever. Andrew is my son, and no proof of that is required. It wouldn't if there wasn't suspicion. And I have my suspicions, and they are quite definite. Think about it. Why would this James come to visit you? All right. He came to see an old friend. That's not surprising. But these presents, and okay, a candy bar, a coloring book for a kid. But do you know how much those things cost? I specifically, on the way home yesterday in Children's World, looked at such a set. If you must know, it's worth almost 2 of my pensions. You'd give someone else's kid something like that. I wouldn't, but James doesn't have kids of his own, and he doesn't visit very often. Why not? Charles wondered. Because he has a child of his own, and his name is Andrew. And not just give you Andrew, rejoice. And he also began to pick up with him, fiddled with him on the floor, with other people's children so play. Besides, he not only gives it to you personally, but he also sends you some presents. And that's just something you know about. But what happens between him and Kathy when you're not around? No one knows that. I'm confident in my wife. Come on, Mom, you're really being silly. Honestly, James is my friend. He wouldn't do this to me. Kathy loves me, Andrew. He even looks like me. He does. Let me show you what he looks like. Clara pulled out an old picture she had prepared beforehand from kindergarten. They're in the crowd of children standing shoulder to shoulder. Little James and Charles. Look at that. That's you. That's James. What does Andrew look like? Actually, he looks like Kathy. Charles looked at the picture doubtfully. I think all little ones look alike to me. I think James and I looked alike too. There you go. Now what's a sucker like that for? It didn't take long for your Kathy to try. I think if she'd given birth to a mulatto, you'd still believe it was your child. And you wouldn't care about the swear words. How could you not believe your wife? The mother is an old fool, but the wife is a saint. Come on, Mom. I've always believed you in everything. But I'm sorry about this. I can't hear it. I don't want that anymore. Charles put the picture aside and stood up. I beg you very much. Don't talk about Kathy anymore. It's nothing of the sort. She's very upset and has picked these fantasies out of her head herself. Andrew, your grandson. My son, there's no doubt about it. We are not going to prove anything. I believe Kathy, and I ask you to believe too, that she has never deceived anyone. Then Charles noticed that Clara was ready to cry. Well, stop it, Mommy. I beg you very much. Don't get upset. So don't make up any horror stories about Kathy or Andrew. I don't like it either. I love them, and I will still be with them. Trust me, I have reason to trust and love her. And you, please trust, and when you come to see us, don't ever talk about it again, at least for the sake of your own grandson. Somehow calming his mother down and preventing a serious fight. Charles drove home in a depressed mood. He felt sorry for his mother, but he also trusted his wife and wasn't going to blame her for anything. When he arrived home, he assured Kathy that everything was all right. He reassured his mother. She apologized and would never speak of the subject again. Indeed, after that, there was no talk of Charles' paternity, and the relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law more or less got better. That is, how did it get better? When she arrived, Clara hardly spoke to Kathy, only made one difficult remark. The young woman was happy with that too, but that her mother-in-law had calmed down and abandoned her antics, she seriously doubted. In 8 years of marriage, she knew her husband's mother's character well. That's how it turned out. One day, coming home rather late to pick up her son from the pool, Kathy overheard Charles in the kitchen talking to his mother. Clara says all the same things about Andrew and James and her hunches. You're talking about the same thing again, Kathy asked tiredly, saying hello again, but not quite as much as before. Her mother-in-law replied venomously, I used to have only guesses, but now, my darling, you cannot get away. I, thank God, am not some illiterate old lady. I know how to use the internet, and it's helped me figure out some of your secrets. Congratulations to you, Kathy replied, not wanting to go into details. She knew she had no special secrets on the internet or anywhere else. You, my darling, we haven't told you that you were seeing James. You were having an affair. Tell me about it. Here's your page. My mother-in-law poked her finger at the laptop screen. He sent you some gifts, like bouquets or something. Well, look at the year. That was long before you married Charles. Charles, you remember perfectly well that James was chasing me from bags and gifts on the internet babies don't get, especially since the baby was born almost 3 years after those bouquets. Well, don't be so secretive. Besides the bouquet, there was something else. Here's a picture of you standing in your arms, so he ran and ran after you. And then he caught up with you. That's not how you say it. But we met 3 times, went to the movies, even kissed. So what? That's it. So that's it. Sonny, we just started pulling on one thread, and already the ball is starting to unravel. What's in the middle of the ball? See for yourself. At first she said she didn't know James. Then it turns out that they went to the movies, and now they're kissing from kissing. Girlfriends don't work out either. So come on, honey, tell me all about it. There's nothing more to tell. Charles, why didn't you say anything? Are you still willing to believe Mom? Or are you okay with the fact that she just can't accept our marriage and realize that we're together forever? I'm sorry, Kathy, but these kinds of revelations are really hard for me to hear at all. I believed you always. Never got jealous. But now, I'm sorry. Mom is right after all. Mom is always right. With an unyielding tone, Clara declared, I was right from the beginning, when I said that this girl was no match for you, that you still have bread from her. You eat bread. You don't say so. Charles, I assure you that's not true. Tried to prove it. Come to your senses, have you? You didn't send other girls. Postcards when I was young didn't kiss anybody but me. I didn't have anything with that James. Can you ask him? What are we talking about? I mean, he's already married. Almost not married. Charles said grimly. I think they're getting a divorce. That's what he said the last time he was here. So clever wife he got. She found out about the presents and the movies and the kiss. About Andrew too. I don't know who's divorcing who, but I'm not going to divorce anybody, and I'm not going to marry anybody else. Charles, believe me, are you ready to lose your family? If you were going to get a divorce, James, you're no fool either. He drives. Maybe he goes to the movies when he drives. But he wasn't going to marry you then or thereafter. Nor will he afterwards. Why should he be so happy? Clara continued to sneer. In short, you, my dear children, sorted out yourselves. I opened your eyes to your beautiful wife. And then you decide for yourself. How do you live and what to do? You like to wear horns and feed other people's children. You like to have a wife like that. Be my guest. I'm not interfering. I never interfered in your affairs. I was just observing your life. And when I couldn't keep silent any longer, I told you everything. At this point, I think we can leave it at that. It disgusts me to be in your house. Goodbye. Clara quickly packed up and left. Kathy could see that her husband was not particularly inclined to talk now, and she had an urgent need to feed the baby, then put him to bed. And Charles and I would talk. Then she decided. But after putting Andrew to bed and going into the bedroom, Kathy saw her husband packing. What are you, Charles? You believed your mother, and now you've decided to leave us. Frightened, Kathy asked. I haven't decided anything yet. I just need to live separately and think about the whole situation, answered the husband. And where will you live apart? Where will you think? At your mother's. Where else? I see. But you understand that it will not be you who will think, but she herself will put into your head everything that is beneficial to her. She hated me from the beginning and was against our marriage. Now she's got the baby mixed up in it. What his mother had said was not only untrue, it was just some silly fantasy. She sat and waited for her husband at the door. Indeed, someone had rung. Charles must have forgotten his keys. Kathy rushed to the door, opened it, but no, it was Molly's neighbor. Not that the girls were mysterious friends, just that they were the same age. Their children were almost the same age, went to the same kindergarten classes. This was very conducive to communication. Molly was a single mother. She didn't have a husband. But she was pretty evasive when asked about her personal life. She didn't even bother asking questions. Why? If a person doesn't feel comfortable talking about it. From Molly's story, she realized that she had a lover, most likely married, who is the father of her William. They continue to see each other, but the man doesn't make a decisive move. And Molly, for whatever reason, is fine with it. The two young women had many topics in common and beyond discussing their personal lives. This time her neighbor dropped by, not just to chat, but most likely out of curiosity. She, unlike Kathy, did not suffer from excessive delicacy. One had put Andrew to bed by now. I saw in the window, first your mother-in-law came out as a sock gift, and then yours went somewhere, and even with those bags full of them. So let me come in for a chat. Did you take Charles on a business trip or something? I don't know what to say, Molly. Maybe I didn't take him on a business trip at all. He went to his mother's. I think Clara got us off. And Kathy spoke briefly of the reason for their quarrel with Charles. Her big, slightly eyes lit up with sympathy and genuine interest. But what a bastard, what a bastard. Don't feel bad. All mother-in-laws are bitches. You're good too. She was too much to handle. If it were up to me, I wouldn't let her on my doorstep. And I wouldn't let my husband see her. Tell me you can't do that to mine. Charles is attached to his mother. He'd still go to her. That's even worse. At least this way, I know what's wrong. Otherwise, there's no telling what she won't sing to him face to face. That's what they're talking about now, Kathy, who was touched by her friend's sympathy. You don't have to cry, that's for sure. Or do you think he won't come again? I don't know. Molly, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't. I'm telling you, Mama, there's a lot of singing in his ears. And you sure didn't have anything to do with that James. Andrew for sure. Charles the son. Molly inquired suddenly. You too? Of course, Charles. Whose else? I didn't have anything with this James or anyone else we dated. That was, long before Charles. Oh, I really wish I'd married that James guy. I know his mother. She's a normal, reasonable woman. Not like that Serena Sarah wants to turn everything into her own way. She's accused me of all sorts of things before, for what they did not reproach. But nothing worked. So she came at me from the other side. See what she's made up now. Yes, it was a win-win, as it turned out. But it's not a no-win situation. You do a DNA test before you poke your nose. That's it. They'll shut up. That's all I need. What do I have to prove? They don't believe it. Let them not believe it. If my husband doubts it, no test will help. He'll still think I lied somehow. And I don't want to mess with all that, Kathy answered. Yes, the situation. So you're willing to get a divorce? I don't want a divorce, Molly. I don't want to in any way. I love Charles, and I'm sure he loves me, and I'm not guilty of anything. I don't want to prove it. I want him to understand and believe it himself. But he doesn't seem capable of that. It's all very hard. Two young women, each unlucky in some way, chatting past midnight. There was nothing particularly significant in this conversation, but Kathy was strangely relieved. Just talking about her misfortune, I guess, except she didn't have much time left for sleep. Charles came home almost a month later, and he was very determined. Raya, I've thought it over, and I've decided to file for divorce. I think my mother's right about a lot of things. I don't think it'll be too much trouble for you. What's much worse is that we'll have to share the apartment, since it was already bought during the marriage. Are you going to leave me and my son without an apartment as well? Coldly, Kathy wondered. This son has something to do with me. I doubt that very much. But in any case, we should do a DNA test. And if it's proven that Andrew is my son, then I want to take him and raise him myself. Without you, on what grounds do you want to take away my maternity rights? There is absolutely no basis for that. And there can't be. So at best, you can claim to be a stay-at-home dad. Will the order of your meetings with Andrew be determined in court? What are you talking about? You don't have to be a stay-at-home mom yourself. Your going out and seeing other people's men won't be grounds for that. The fact that you let these men go anywhere near the baby, they're in our apartment like they're in their own house, sounds like a pretty good reason to me. What men are you raving about? Kathy doesn't even have the energy left to resent these accusations. All right, don't get too excited. I'm sure that any analysis will show that the child has nothing to do with me, so you'll have him all to yourself. But I'm sorry, no alimony. And the apartment will have to be divided, because despite all your carousing, you're still the mother of a minor son and the law is still on your side. I don't understand, Charles. How is it that you were so quick to believe all the nasty things your mother said? After all, we loved each other. Anyway, I'm not going to change your mind about anything. Her words were interrupted by the doorbell, which Kathy was glad she did. She had already realized that she could not change Charles' mind, and she didn't want to try. It was clear that after these words they would not live together. Without guessing who it might be, she opened the door and was stunned. It was James, as usual, with a brightly colored box in his hands. Where did you come from? What brings you here? No warning, she muttered as she lowered her friend into the apartment. Surprise. Fun, James exclaimed. I don't see any joy on their faces. Where is Andrew? I'm here for him. Immediately, the man fell to the floor with a clenched fist. Charles. You what? Have you got your hands on your face? Kathy. Crazy bandit. Sorry, couldn't help myself. I don't see it. Alive, your James is just knocked out. Love and happiness to you. We'll settle the rest in court. And walked out of the apartment, fully convinced of the right thing to do. As, by the way, our hero lover showed up, just as ordered. Kathy must have called him to say that her husband had left. He's here, isn't he? Thank you. I must say, the mother finally got the noodles off her ears and the horns off her bad head. And that childhood friend very well hit. It wouldn't be a bad thing for the faithful spouse, too. Never mind, it was no good fighting with women. Kathy, meanwhile, was tending to James, helping him up, taking him to the kitchen, getting out some medicine. His lip was badly smashed. At least his teeth were intact. "I'm sorry, James. He seems to have lost his mind. I can't explain it any other way." Pathetically, she said. "Yeah, I didn't think he was such a boxer. What's going on here? Has he started drinking or something?" snarled James Ice, slipping him a bag. "Charles, no, he hasn't. Just, his mama gave him a big comet on his brain. I don't know about Clara, I know, but I didn't think Charles was that influenced." "How did you know about her?" Kathy wondered. "I know it from her. She called me the other day. I thought she was crazy, but I had no idea it was so contagious." "What did she tell you?" "Yeah, the same thing she told you. She must have called both of you with that, complaint. Come and get your kid and Kathy." "I don't get it at all." "What baby? What Kathy? I thought she had the wrong number. What's she gonna do?" "Andrew, your son looks just like you." "I got you, Kathy. My son won't keep any more." I thought about calling Charles and asking her what's wrong, but I didn't want to upset her. She's his mother, after all. She's always been with a man. But to have it come to this, Kathy cried. After listening to James, I knew for a long time that Clara didn't love me and would never put up with Charles marrying me. But after all, Andrew is her grandson. How could she say that about a child? But don't cry, Kathy. If that's the case, why don't you take that DNA test? It's not such a problem now, as I understand it. It costs money, of course, but that's what I'll give if Charles doesn't want it. Thank you, James, but tell me, why should I? What do I have to prove to whom? I didn't get married pregnant, I only lived with my husband. He never had any doubts. And all of a sudden, it cost crazy money to make up something, how I will run to do some kind of tests, and even pay for them myself. No, this is too much. If Charles doesn't believe me and doesn't love my son, no amount of testing will help. Besides, I don't know what else his mother will think. What more proof will he want from me? Suit yourself, of course. But in the event of a divorce, I guess he'll have to. Otherwise, he'll waive child support, and even if he has already refused, he's going to evict me from the apartment. Angrily, Kathy wiped away her tears. Oh, listen, James, I've got to get Andrew to daycare. You just sit here for a while. Charles called his wife in the evening. Now he was gloomy, but calm, determined. Now our divorce, I think, raises no questions. Your lover arrived very timely. I'll stop by on my day off to clear up all the details. All right, come. Just as evenly, Kathy replied. She didn't want to engage in any conversation with her husband, who was now almost ex-husband. She looked at Andrew, who, despite the late hour, could not tear himself away from some new toy. He was very excited about Uncle James' arrival, about his present, and he could hardly let him go in the evening, asking him a lot of questions. Will you come again tomorrow? We'd play together. No one's that interested. I'll come if you invite me. Looked at Kathy. James. We can play at home and go to the playground. I saw a good playground here, where my dad never went with me. And if he did, he wouldn't let me do anything. He said I'd fall down and go to sleep. Mom, will you come with us? The two of us can go if you want, Kathy answered. I don't have time, and I'm not in the mood. She decided that it was really better to talk to Charles about the impending divorce without the child. The question of divorce had already been decided for herself. She could not go on living with a man who did that. And Charles himself, by all appearances, is determined and is not going to reconcile. As hard as it was for her to realize that her married life had ended so ugly, she decided she should hold back and not stoop to explaining herself to her husband. The day Charles told her he was coming over for a serious talk, she sent her son out for a walk with James. She was afraid of the impending conversation. Not that Charles would kick them out of the apartment. It wasn't his accusation or scandal that she was afraid he would really start claiming her son. What she wanted more than anything was for her ex-husband to disappear from their lives forever in the event of a breakup. But how could that be done? After all, Andrew really is his son, which means his father has a right to see him. And if he also decides to file for deprivation of her rights, it will hardly work. How much nerve and health will cost her all these courts and proceedings? It turned out she was not afraid for nothing. In general, the meeting went quite peacefully while they were talking about the apartment. Charles came, fortunately, without his mother. Rye had asked him to come, and she was glad she did. This time there was no unnecessary insults or explanations. Kathy's things and didn't bother from the apartment. Charles wasn't going to know her. You and the baby could live here until the end of the divorce proceedings. It was with the baby that the hospital worked. It turns out she doesn't even want to call her son by his name. Cut him out of her life. But she asked about something else. And after, I have no place to move out. That was really true. Kathy sold her room in the communal apartment that was left when her mother died in order to buy this spacious 2-room apartment, which was to become their family nest, as she loved this apartment. Don't worry, nobody's driving you away. We'll sell this money. We'll split it. You'll buy yourself something. And then came the conversation she was so afraid of. We'll have to do a DNA paternity test after all. I'm not going to pay alimony on somebody else's kids, and I'm not going to file for any child support. You're disowning your son. It is your right. You can in good conscience consider it not yours. Come on, honey, you're the one who's all right. So brave. You just remember that your child has a legal father and quickly demand the money. And I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to have to pay. That's if we assume that Andrew is not mine. What if it turns out to be mine? You won't agree to a reconciliation. Reconciliation after that? Of course not. She swallowed her tears. She felt as if she were speaking now, not to the man who had been her beloved husband just a few days before, but to some strange and evil man. I agree, because being related to a child is irrelevant, given your relationship with James. Well, if the test shows that the son is still mine, then I will insist that I get custody of him. You can go out with him if you want. Thank you, benefactor. So I'm the one who's going to see my own son at set times, under the supervision of your mother. Kathy got indignant. Can you imagine? I have a full-time, high-paying job, and an apartment of my own. And my mother is a teacher by training. So all the advantages are on my side. And please don't talk about my mother with such disdain. Now I can say whatever I want, however I want. I'm very glad I can tell you straight out for the first time that I hate your mother and despise her. For a minute, Kathy thought her husband wanted to hit her, but Charles held back. Thank you. You finally turned your rotten guts inside out. You can't expect to be treated well after that. Coldly, the man said, and hurried away. Kathy sat down tired. She, too, was choking with rage. A son by Charles is undeniable. So now they would have to share not only the apartment, but also the child. Whether he needed Andrew or not, neither he nor his mother would give up the chance to spoil her blood for anything. So who's the man? Handsome, by the way. Did you really find the next guy so fast? I envy you. Come on, Molly. It's just an old acquaintance. The baby's his, and he won't dare. And the case could drag on for years. And if he keeps up with you, he won't let the kid get away with it. But don't worry. What am I thinking? You might be able to change things to your advantage. What do you mean, change things? You can't cheat the dough. Kathy was surprised. You can't cheat it, but you can cheat a little. What did you think of? And Molly got closer to Kathy. She began to outline her plan for the day. Kathy drove up to the lab, where she was to take the materials for the paternity test. Charles was already waiting for her at the door. I don't understand. Where's the baby? Instead of a hello, he was surprised. Why take him? Too unnecessary and stressful. We were vaccinated a month ago. He was very nervous, and now everything to do with doctors is painful. I cut off a strand of his hair. I brought it back. Oh, come on. What if it doesn't work? I'm off work. Charles boils over. Don't make it up. It'll do. I called here yesterday to find out everything. My son's hair is in a sterile bag. It's just like it's supposed to be. I was reassuring Kathy. Come on, let's go. I want to get this over with as soon as possible. They took the hair for tests. They promised to let me know the results soon. I hope you'll go get it. You know, I have to go to kindergarten. In general, I am less interested in the result. Relieved, smiled Kathy. Strange that you are so calm. Are you so confidently unhappy? Charles asked. More than 100%. Even wider, she smiled. And if my son really started, was a man, but Kathy stopped him. You'll get the results, then we'll talk. In the evening, James came in. He had promised to teach Andrew to play chess. He saw the mood of Kathy. He was surprised. You're surprisingly cheerful today. That's good, he remarked. Yes, I am cheerful today. I've had an operation here. I'll tell you about it if you like, Kathy promised. Whether James was interested or not, after playing with Andrew over tea with Kathy, he asked if he could share the joy. Yes, James, Charles, and I passed the paternity test today, with a wide smile, she reported. Well, congratulations. Now can you prove your and our complete innocence? James smiled. No, I don't. I mean, you weren't even accused. Don't worry, but the test will be negative. Kathy was triumphant. That's how James' faces got all twisted up. Yes, I'll be rid of Charles for good, and there will be no baby sharing. Yes, I didn't do it the fair way. But if there's no other, don't think I'm not a slut. Andrew, his son. It's just that I gave up my baby's hair for research, but not my own, but my neighbor's. Wow, James was even more surprised. Why would you do that? Because that's a crime, a forgery. How can you do that? Can you do that to me? No, I'm sorry. I couldn't help it. You should have heard what your friend threatened me with, darling. A crime is when you make someone feel bad. Who's getting hurt here? Charles is getting rid of child support. I'm getting rid of Charles. Everyone is happy and content. But Kathy, don't you get it? It's not a toy. A father has a right to know. He doesn't want to know James. He doesn't want to know his son. So he won't. Maybe when Andrew grows up. In a word, we'll miss it. Doesn't dampen my joy. I wanted to get rid of Charles, and I did. You'll see. And he'll be glad. Charles must have been looking forward to the result, too, especially after talking to his wife. Why was she having so much fun? Apparently Andrew is my son, and she's anticipating how the summer isn't about us, but hinting that he's not mine just to tease. Maybe mute. But she's already worked something out with James. That's their business, of course. Yeah, it all came out of the blue. Didn't think so, didn't you? They say you should always listen to your mothers. The heart's a thing. How'd she get the river to flow? It's clever, but now I won't walk with anyone without her approval. I've had enough of 8 years out of my life. That's enough, he thought. The divorce was so desirable that Charles didn't even hesitate to pay more for the urgency of the case. A couple of days later, he showed up at the same lab to collect the test results. He was given a sealed envelope. He printed it out in the car. He wanted to do it at Kathy's house, in front of her, but he couldn't stand it. He read what was written and leaned back in his seat. Well, it was all to be expected. So what did it turn out to be? He had had such a serious fight with his wife for nothing. Mother was wrong. No, she wasn't. She gave birth to him, all right, but she obviously had a thing for James. She's not really hiding it anymore. I mean, he's had all sorts of shenanigans too. Not a saint, but he was good at hiding his affairs. Never once was there any suspicion. Although she was jealous, he knew how to hide it. At first it was only when he was young that he almost got into trouble. Barely made it out then. But there was a lucky girl who was too much fun. outside of any adventures and decides him enough. And then, no punctures. So how does Kathy respond to this test? Her old home. Charles came in cheerful, satisfied, opened the door with his key. Family. I came into the hallway. Kathy came out. What are you shouting for? What family do you want? We seem to be getting a divorce just quietly. Andrew is there watching cartoons very well. I haven't seen my son for a long time. Brought him some candy, had fun. Who's my son? What are you talking about? Kathy went pale. That was strange. I thought the test result was supposed to show that Charles didn't have a son. At least you didn't lie about that. Looks like James was the one who was tricked. And for what, I ask you? Toys? Or did you get something more substantial from him? I'll show him now. He waved a white piece of paper in front of Kathy's face. She took it. Read it. Paternity was 99% proven. How so? Because I cut the hair off Molly's son's head. So, just be happy. Wait a minute. Okay, Andrew, your son. But you tell me about your other son. Kathy stopped him. What son? The one next door. You're not gonna tell me. Are you gonna accuse me of cheating? What? Where did you come from? What's that got to do with being dumbfounded? Charles muttered, but quickly pulled himself together. So it was Molly who blabbed. She's lying. We didn't have anything. I don't know who had her baby. Don't turn this around. I'm the one who took William's hair to be tested. I wanted you to leave us alone, thinking Andrew wasn't yours. But it turned out that way. Molly is really good. She probably set the whole thing up on purpose. So it was you who horned me all these years. And you've been making a fool of me. You're a scoundrel, Charles. Now congratulate your mother on her replacement, granddaughter. Except that the daughter-in-law, and the good one, won't be. Your mother will have to tie her tongue in a knot. What? So that's what you've done. How could you? Why did you cheat like that? You shouldn't have done that. Charles was confused, didn't know what to say, what to do. That's it. That's enough, Charles. Go away already. I don't want anything from you. But I won't give you anything of mine. Go to Molly. Go to your mother. Go to hell. Anywhere. I got a kid at home. He don't need to hear you yell at him. I'll see you in court next time. Charles, stunned by the discovery, went home to his mother. There was no telling what else this affair of his would turn out to be. What you want from that love? What about him? It's not his fault they put him in the hospital. He was the only one left. Mom was indignant at the time. She can't give birth properly. Second month and already some kind of preservation. I was flying like a dragonfly for 9 months, and this one is already dying. So there you go. And he met this Molly, beautiful, bright girl, about whom there were rumors. Yeah, he got careless, and she soon announces she's pregnant. What a blessing. 2 pregnant women around my neck. Had to pay, of course, but she got off Molly for another reason. She had another one that was more lucrative, apparently. I think it all calmed down, and then it resurfaced. At what unfortunate moment? Well, Molly, you bastard. So set up. Evil, he thought. And how not to be angry when in an instant he went from a cheating husband to a traitor. Now try to say something about him. There would be only one answer. What's the answer? Whether she's been out with others or not, at least Kathy doesn't have any children by her side. Andrew. What Andrew? I didn't have much doubt that it was his son Charles, to be honest. Kathy sat at home and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It turns out that her husband was cheating on her with his friend next door, like in the joke, and he accused me of cheating. How did he resent it? Who would have looked from the outside at this outraged virtue? But what is Molly like? Why did she start it all? She couldn't have known who her child was. Or maybe she hoped to tie Charles down that way. Yeah, I thought she said it was the end of the line. Now the proof's kind of there. But it's not really proof. The name on that piece of paper is Andrew. Will she come in with an explanation or vice versa? She'll be hiding from me. It turned out that Molly wasn't going to hide. That same evening, apparently after putting her son to bed. She went to see Kathy. Didn't come in the way she always did, not perky, not happy. Even her call sounded timid and guilty. And immediately guessed who it opened. "Hello, Kathy here came to explain and apologize. Let me in, or what?" Almost whispered Molly, "Come in." Let her in Kathy's apartment. I'm not going to cling to my hair like that. Even if I did, you could stand up for yourself, but it wouldn't hurt to explain yourself. I've been wondering myself, why? No, I'm not talking about the main thing. It's pretty clear there. Why did you do the test? Why did you give William the hair? To help. At least we'll have tea. Thank you. I knew you were kind, and did so. So you have been going on like that all these years, but it never happened. You mean it was an accident? You were in the hospital for observation. But that's when he came to me. And I was young and stupid, so I got knocked up. I don't even remember what happened to him. Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I didn't know if it was from him or who. Yeah, well, that's the way it is. What can you do? But when I realized that the baby would be 3 months old, I decided to tell him to your Charles. So you know how scared he was. I wish Kathy hadn't found out. She's pregnant. She mustn't worry. I was so offended. I was so angry. I'm pregnant too. And no one cares, except my mother, of course. And my mother was ready to tear my hair out. I wanted to tell you all about it, but he came and whined and begged me for money. But I decided I wouldn't spoil it for you. What nobility. There's a lot of money, but where did it come from? I don't even remember anymore. But I really decided to leave him alone. Maybe it wasn't nobility. I just really thought that my child would grow up without a father anyway. And so is yours. Besides, I got the money from Charles, so I figured, why not get some more from other people? I went out with someone who was also married, but wealthy. He had his own firm. So I went to him with a belly and said that it was from him to pay the money. Otherwise his wife would find out. He got scared. It turned out that the firm and many other things are registered to his wife, so there was no way out. He did pay, but he should have been more careful, so no one would have seen a man anywhere near her. It was great how you took advantage of your pregnancy, and you weren't ashamed, Kathy shared. What should I be ashamed of? I wasn't married. It's all those men. They cheated on their wives. Did both of them leave me? Or how many were there? Well, you know, I came here to tell you everything honestly, to forgive you, even to ask for forgiveness. And you're making fun of me too. I was just a stupid young girl who had bad luck. No one would marry me. How can they do that if they're already married? Didn't you try dating singles? That's it, I've tried. And before you judge, you'd better think about how your life would have turned out if you had. Okay, Molly, I get it. I'm not judging you, and I'm not gonna listen to your whole life. Have you ever gone behind my back with this ex-boyfriend of mine? No, I'm telling you, think about it. We live in the same house. We see each other every day. If we were dating, wouldn't everybody know about it? We'd just say hello. That's all. 6 months after William was born, I met another, also rich, married. By the way, I had high hopes for him for a reason. And now, you won't believe it. I've been with someone else for a few years now. He's married, but very nice, with money and all. And now he seems to have decided to get a divorce. Imagine, his wife left him for someone else. That happens. All right, Molly, I get it. You tell me why you're doing this whole DNA test thing if you're already okay. Oh, that's not really okay. William, I'm a total fatherless with a dash on my birth certificate. And that's not a good one. Molly said seriously. And now what do you get out of this test? Could not understand Kathy. Now I know for sure who my son is from. I told you, I had my doubts. I went up to Charles one day and told him that his son would be a good idea to think about it. He'll do a test. Then we'll talk. But at my own expense, I found out how much that test cost. And I got greedy, as they say. But if I do it, I'll pay and it won't turn out to be his. I'll be left with no money, and I'll be embarrassed. And now I know for sure. Now I don't feel sorry for the money. I can go to court, no matter what. I can't get away with it. Yeah, you're having fun, I'm sorry. Anyway, that's your business now. The wait is open. We're getting a divorce. Can you at least marry Charles? What? A ready-made family? No, I have much better prospects. I don't want your Charles in any capacity. But at least you're not mad at me. But honestly, I didn't mean to hurt you. Don't be angry, Molly. There's nothing to be angry about now. I'm telling you, we're strangers to each other. And it turns out we're strangers to you too. I'm even grateful to you, if you must know, for opening my eyes. But that's good. I'm very glad. I see you're getting on in life too. That little man keeps popping up. He's a good guy. Don't let the experienced guy get away with it. I don't have time for this anymore. You shouldn't have. Anyway, there are a lot of good men. You should look after yourself more beautifully, dress more daringly. There'd be no shortage of them, even married ones. Thank you. All right. Molly, go. It's late. Kathy waved, saying goodbye to her friend. And now, as it turned out, almost a relative. What else if their sons were half-brothers? Kathy lay down, but could not sleep for a long time. She remembered the past and how she'd been lying in the preservation of the frightened father of her child, who was still a clot of cells in her belly. She remembered Charles visiting her in the hospital, comforting reassurance, bringing strawberries from the market, perhaps just out of Molly's bed, or was he bringing her to their house? It mattered little now. However, thinking of her ex-husband, then and there interrupted with another. And James, yes, he loved and was very upset when he found out she was marrying Charles. Then he apparently calmed down, got married himself, but quickly divorced, never had any children. What kind of father would he have been? I didn't know there were such men. She didn't remember her father very well herself, not because he left her and my mom when I was little. He just never paid much attention to her. That's probably why Charles' inattention to his son was taken for granted. And James was so sincerely enjoying doing things with Andrew. And the boy is so drawn to Uncle James, becoming more and more attached to him. That should be stopped. He's a good lad, of course, but he'll be gone soon. And we've got a lot of stress ahead of us. Changing apartments, looking for a new one, getting it all fixed up. That's a lot of money. If only we had any more. No, you can't go to sleep with those thoughts in your head. But what can you do if you can't think of anything else? The next day, James came in. But how was your con? He asked Kathy, making his way into the hallway. It sure did. Let's go into the kitchen and have some tea. I will, Kathy answered. No, in my room. I've already set up chess. Andrew jumped around the guests. You go and play. Do not disturb the adults to talk. His mother shouted at him sternly. Again, he was alone again. Say, Uncle James, you can't play chess alone. We'll play later, Andrew. You have to listen to your mother. It can't be helped, James promised. Why are you being so hard on him today? I myself have been guilty of letting you get too close. You'll be gone tomorrow, not today, and the child will suffer. What are you going to listen to about grown-up things? Having received consent, Kathy, her father and her favorite uncle at the same time, and moving to a different neighborhood, to a different apartment. But no matter how you slice it, you can't get more than a one-bedroom. He'll have a fun life in one room with his mom. He'd have to think of some kind of screen. These thoughts were interrupted by a call from my mother-in-law, Clara. She wanted very much to express her attitude to what was happening and to pour out on her daughter-in-law a new batch of insults. But Kathy immediately dropped the call and put her former mother-in-law on the blacklist. No more of those people in her life. Andrew ran into the kitchen. Mom, are you sitting alone? Come with us. See how I beat Uncle James. I'm not sitting. I'm doing the dishes, and then I'm making dinner. Grown-ups have a lot of things to do. That's what distracts Uncle James. Doesn't he have something to do? He's not here to see us. He's here to see his mom and dad. I'm almost done, and I spend enough time with my parents. James came into the kitchen and said, "Let me help you." And you, Andrew, set up the train track. As the baby ran away, James began talking to Kathy. "I'm really leaving soon in 3 days, but you don't think I'm going to leave you at such a difficult time. First of all, I'm seeing you with a lawyer very experienced in divorce cases. He'll help make sure you don't have any unnecessary embarrassment. Free of charge, of course. And you can help with the size or the sale of the apartment too. If there are any other difficulties, you call me right away. Even if I can't make it, I'll do everything I can to make sure you get help here too. And don't worry about Andrew. I'll find words to help him through the breakup. And I'll be there as soon as I can." Kathy put the dishes aside and sat down at the table. "Thank you, James. You're a true friend. But aren't you doing us too many favors? You've dumped on us. Help with this and that and a lawyer for free. And to call if there's any trouble. Why, you tell me? I'm not an invalid after all. Not a poor old lady. Why on earth would you say that?" James frowned. "And you don't understand something. Your nice relatives were right. I didn't come to you for nothing. And now I'm not just teasing, as you say, a boon. Don't you understand that I love you? Yes, it hasn't gone away since then. And now, after more than 10 years, I can firmly say that it won't go away. It probably never will, ever again." But confused, started was Kathy, for whom this recognition was not that it was a complete surprise. It was more like a dream. And the woman was sure that the unfulfilled wait, you with yours, but I do not claim anything yet. I understand that you are still married. You need to come to your senses after everything that happened. Work out all your problems. You know it's going to be very difficult to do that without a true friend. So please, do not refuse my help. I do not refuse. I am very grateful, but I don't know how I can repay it. Who's talking about payment? I haven't. At any rate, the best reward for me would be knowing that you, Andrew, are doing well, and maybe that you will someday see me as more than just a friend." Kathy covered her face with her hands and whispered, "I'm sorry, James. Please forgive me." "For what?" He was surprised. "For making the wrong choice 8 years ago. How could I have been so blind? Maybe I should be the one to ask for forgiveness. I wasn't persistent enough. I stepped aside, giving way to my friend Charles. I thought you would be happier with him. So we were both wrong." The three of them spent the remaining 3 days before James left. James, Kathy, and Andrew. After James left, Kathy's divorce problems began to be resolved with the help of a lawyer whom Kathy had introduced James to. It went quickly and without much difficulty. The child, of course, was left with his mother. Charles, however, now had little claim to custody. He began to have difficulties of his own. Molly decided to establish paternity and file for child support, and here it was hard for him to refuse. He tried to scare her that he would take the baby away, but he got the wrong guy. "Yes, please, take it even today." The former mistress was happy. "Let's set up a communication order and be done with it." Charles had to shamefully retreat. After all, he wasn't going to take any of the children. It was my mother's advice to influence women in this way. Now she was only reassuring her son. "Don't worry, Charles, who hasn't made a mistake when they were young. The next one you'll have is the real best wife ever. I'm taking care of that. Miranda has a daughter, a beautiful girl. I'm taking a good look at her. I'll know you'll be happy with her. And then I can imagine who Mom will choose. Yeah, I've missed the best one, since she won't be with anyone, nor with a new one. Will my mother let me live the way?" Gloomily, Charles thought. The apartment they shared with Kathy they quickly sold, and here James helped. He found a good realtor. And Charles and his mother immediately began a scandal over money. Clara was afraid that her well-to-do Charles would spend it all on nonsense, and she demanded that the money be in her account. Her son, on the other hand, dreamed of finally taking advantage of his freedom from his family and spending at least some of it. That was it. Kathy had no intention of spending any of it. James, once again arriving, proposed to her and invited her to live with him in the capital. She, of course, agreed. The money might come in handy for an expansion. I hope that Andrew will have a brother or sister soon, he said. At the last meeting, which was also goodbye, Charles rebuked his ex-wife for forgetting him so quickly for getting married. What's your hurry? You should have waited. Maybe they would have made up. Get back together again. In a deadpan voice, he said. No, Kathy answered. I'm glad it worked out that way. You ought to get married soon, too. You've got a family ready, haven't you? Molly and William. Thank you. I need that Molly. She's getting married, too, by the way. Is this some kind of epidemic? All I have to do is pay child support. Don't worry about it. It'll get better, Kathy reassured him. She was happy to be going to her new life. Therefore, she spoke quite sincerely. After all, a happy person always wants to share his happiness and not to leave only ruins in the place of the